morning, everyone. Thank you again for your patience. Again, the Education Workforce Youth Committee, Councilman John Bullock standing in place for our chair, Robert Stokes. We have two members of our committee who are with us today. So we have Councilman James Torrance of the 7th District. And then we also have Councilwoman Felicia Porter of the 10th District joining us. We do have some excused absences for our members of the committee, including our chair, including also Councilman Glover, and also Vice President Middleton, as well as Councilmember Cohen. So again, today we're here for a City Council Bill 210047 Charter Amendment, the Dante Barksdale Career Technology Apprentice Fund, again for the purpose of establishing a continuing non-lapsing Dante Barksdale Career Technology Education Fund, and again to supplement pre-apprenticeship programs. So we do have our agencies who are here with us today, and we definitely want to recognize the agency representatives who are with us. So I know we have Nina Themelis from the mayor's office. Thank you for joining us today. I know we have representatives. I know you're going to speak on behalf of Baltimore City Schools. I know we also have Hillary Ruley from the Law Department. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, absolutely. I know Robert Senemaid from Finance is also here with us too. So again, we thank you for that. And also Sophia from the Mayor's office is also with us. So again, and I know Nikki Thompson, I saw her around here. Well, there you are, Aaron DeGraffenried. So again, we're very much, very well represented today. So without further ado, we'll definitely go into the agency reports and to make sure everybody stands by it. So first, I know we received favorable reports from Moed, City Schools, and I know, so let's go from Moed. Do you stand by your report? We haven't heard anything additional. Yes, please, thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the council.
I know, Mackenzie Garvin, thank you for joining us too, yes.
Can you hear me?
There we go, all right.
Okay. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the council. My name is Mackenzie Garvin. I'm the Deputy Director and Chief of Staff at Moed. We provided our written testimony and we do stand by our bill report and we are in support of the charter amendment. I did want to highlight one portion of our written report, which is that we did announce the Apprenticeship Subsidy program at Moed. We just recently launched this. This is a program that is funded with state ARPA funds. We have $250,000 set aside to subsidize up to $2,500 for up to 100 apprentices. We also have hired an apprenticeship coordinator who is working with Baltimore City businesses to help reinvigorate existing apprenticeship programs or work with businesses who are interested in starting an apprenticeship program or working in partnership with the state. Of course, this is funded through ARPA funding, so this is temporary funding, but I just wanted to note that. In addition, I wanted to note that we've also launched our mobile navigator program. They're available to work and go out with different council events now that the spring time has come along, and they're also there to advocate for individuals to sign up as registered apprentices through this program.
Thank you. And then one quick question. When did the apprenticeship coordinator come online?
The apprenticeship coordinator started just about 2 months ago. The whole program just launched within the last few months, so it's just recently started. We don't have very much data on it. We do have about 11 companies who are a part of the program, and I want to say we have around 46 individuals who are in the pipeline to utilize the subsidy. And like I said, the total amount is around $250,000, and the max amount of apprentices we can have within this budget is 100.
Awesome. And any questions from members of the committee? Okay. Okay. Well, again, thank you so much. City Schools, I know you have some words on their behalf.
Yes, Nina Themelis with the Mayor's Office of Government Relations. A representative from school system was not able to attend this morning. They do stand by the report and not taking a direct position on the bill, but they do support expanded apprenticeship opportunities for their students.
Thank you. Much appreciated. All right, moving right along. Law, please enlighten us.
Okay. Hi, Hillary Ruley for the Law Department. We stand by a report with the removal of some of the lines on page 2. We would approve the bill for form and legal sufficiency.
All right, thank you so much. And if there are any questions from the committee, let me know at this point. Again, I know we do have those amendments. We're not going to vote on those today, but again, that'll be part of a work session that we'll be having at a later time. So if there are additional points, please raise those too. All right. And then we'll go to Finance, again, please, I know your position, but please share with us some of the rationale too.
Sure. Good morning. Bob Senemy, Budget Director representing the Department of Finance. So we stand by our bill report. We had two things we wanted to mention why we are opposed to a bill like this. First is this would set up a special revenue fund, and we are not fans of those funds for flexibility reasons. If we gather money and put it into a separate fund for a separate purpose, that really ties the hands of the executive to be able to use monies for whatever the emergency or the issue might be for any given year. I think COVID's a good example of that. You know, we had to make significant reductions in fiscal 21. If you have a special fund and you've set money aside, even for a good cause like something like this, it does limit the flexibility of the executive to respond to issues. The second issue we wanted to raise on this is that the way the bill is set up, we would charge contractors to pay for this. We think that that will just be turned around and passed back to the city as a cost. So the way the bill is written, it makes it seem like we're assigning the cost to folks that contractors, but really they will end up passing that cost back to the city when we have to contract for certain services. So we think this will be a cost to the city. It's hard to know how much it will be because it will be kind of buried in a lot of contracts that go to the Board of Estimates to be approved. So again, based on the flexibility of not wanting to have money set aside in a fund like this and the potential cost to the city is why we were opposed to the bill.
Yeah, you sort of alluded to one of the questions I was going to ask is what you thought the overall cost of the program would be. And I know you said that that wasn't quite clear at this point.
Yeah, we would have to do a much deeper a dive to figure out what that would be in terms of how much it would cost based on the number of based on what contracts this would apply to. So we weren't able to come up with a good estimate, but we do believe it will be a cost that will be passed back to the city.
And then let me ask one other follow-up question, just from a broader point of view. I know you've mentioned, again, the hesitance in terms of restricting funds. With this bill or any others, can you envision any way to possibly amend it to make it more flexible or make it possible to fund programs such as this?
Well, I would say we have amended similar bills like this to say that it's not required that money go into a program like this, but that as part of the budget each year, we have the flexibility to put money into or a fund like this or for that purpose. So we've done that when other bills like this have come where we've said don't make it restricted, but have a fund available that if we choose in the budget and we have the resources available, that we would say we would put the fund towards that purpose, you know, something like apprenticeships or something else. So the budget's going to come out next Monday. There is actually some, a little sneak preview, there is some advancing on the apprenticeship front. It's something we've heard kind of loud and clear from the council. But again, we want to have the flexibility to be able to do it based on the affordability. And there's some years that are tight that we just don't want to have that money restricted where it could be used for other purposes.
Okay. Any questions from the committee?
Yeah.
So first Councilman Torrance and then Councilmember Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bob, I have a question, and this is really, and this is something I'm struggling with finance and the budget office and procurement. How are we not able to do modeling exactly to understand the actual cost, right? Because I think about how do we know the standard cost for each position in terms of what the market is, and cost out whether or not we're being overcharged by an actual vendor who's performing the work. So I'm just wondering how you're going to do this modeling. And I mean that in a meaningful way because I hear finance say that we're restricting, we have these restrictions, but I need modeling to prove that that's happening because we can no longer continue to have the conversations where we don't know and we're assuming, but we haven't done the actual physical analysis to actually say it. That's just my feedback to you guys because it's a little troubling, especially when the state can do that for us. Thank you.
No, say Councilman Torrance, thank you for sharing that. I think that kind of takes the question I had to another step. So again, thank you. And if anything you want to add at this point.
Did you want us to?
I would just say, for example, this money for apprenticeships in the way the bill was originally written would, as finance indicated, would be coming from the contractors who would pay into the fund, and the contractors are being paid by us. So essentially, if the contract costs, I'm making this up, $100, and now they have an obligation to pay into the fund, the contract now costs the city $105, and $5 goes into the fund. So I understand your question generally about modeling, but the reality is for the piece that's funded by the contractors, it's net neutral. The more you require them to pay, the more we pay for the contract, and it goes into the fund. Now, there's other revenue sources like grants or charitable donations, and I don't know how finance would model a future grant, but when you're talking about this, you're saying positions and costs, right? So, for example, somebody on a city contract might be in an apprenticeship field like a plumber. You know what the prevailing wage for a plumber is, and under this bill, as well as the state bill, the amount of money the general contractor has to pay for that plumber is going to fluctuate with the increase in the prevailing wage of the plumber's salary. So that's part of the issue. Like, to model this for you, you'd have to know which contracts it would affect so we can make a guess about which people would have a plumber. And then you would have to say, okay, what's the prevailing wage of the plumber going to be? And then this, the piece about funding it through contractors, then you have to determine, will they be required to submit money into this fund? Or will the prevailing wage hit a ceiling and they won't? And that analysis is generally what's done in the state and federal level under the Davis-Bacon Act. So this particular modeling, I think, would be quite challenging. When the state did a similar bill, the fund has pretty much no money because nobody ever gets that little daylight between the amount of money that the apprenticed worker on the job gets paid and the requirement to pay into the fund. So if you get grants or donations, absolutely, then that would go into this fund and you could use it for apprenticeships. But the thought that your contractors will actually beef up the fund and make a bunch of money in there isn't true. Like, at the state level, essentially the fiscal note for this bill that did the very same thing noted that they expected, after an entire year of state contracts paying into this, only $100,000 or less actually would be paid by contractors, because you'll bump up against that prevailing wage ceiling. And that's really important to note, because if you want to model this, there is a state fiscal note on the exact same thing, and the modeling shows there's really not a lot of money in the fund from that. So if maybe that could help for this one.
My feedback is constructive. I get it, right? I
Yeah.
worked on budget and tax. I get the modeling. But I'm asking is, why don't we do that and provide it substantively and not come to hearings and say, I don't know?
Well, that makes a lot of sense, except,
That's what my frank feedback is.
Yeah.
Because, again, I've sat on this council for nearly 16 months, and that is the tenure of it. And that, to me, is a failure. And I'm just being frank.
okay, well, that language that would require the modeling is the one the law department's striking out. So I imagine that's why nobody came with an estimate, because that can't be in this bill. But if you do a future bill where you actually can implement that language, then I'm sure there could be modeling.
Yeah, and to both your points, I think, I'm glad you talk about, this bill, both at the local and the state level. And I think to Councilman Torrance's point, I think you're making a broader point in terms of
Right.
some of the bills that come in front of the council
Yes.
as it relates
So
to
that-
fiscal. So
Yeah.
I got your
So,
saying.
like, I get it, because I get the prevailing wage. I get that at one time
Yeah.
the federal government, through Obama administration, allowed us to use 1% of transit dollars to pay for
Right.
apprenticeships, right? I know the modeling behind it. It's just, why are we continually saying that we don't know when we have seen similar modeling? I could create a spreadsheet real fast. I can do the modeling. I just want to make sure that we get there, but not just come to hearings and say we don't know.
Yeah, and I would say, I mean, obviously I can't answer for finance, but I would say that this part you're asking for the modeling is the very language we would have to remove in order to make the bill legal. So maybe someone didn't do the modeling because this bill can't do that.
Understood. Councilman Reporter?
So my question about prevailing wage was actually answered. I was going to ask how you were going to address the prevailing wage issue, but more importantly, the commingling of funds between not only the contractors that are paying into this fund, but also those that are regulated by the city as well.
Okay, let me see if I got that. So yes, so the way the bill's written, there's payment in by the contractor, and then there's other sources of funds, right? So like, one of those sources would be grants, say you get a United Way grant. I don't know how you would model that, but maybe finance knows.
Yes.
And then the other portion would be anything that every year you wish to budget and put in the fund. So I guess there could be some sort of modeling about, like, next year, will we have money to make an annual contribution to the fund? Like that would be a valid source as well. That would still be in there. But for the contractor piece, I just didn't know if everybody understood, like, the modeling there is a little
Yeah, and
different. Yeah.
And so I'm not necessarily talking about the modeling, I'm talking about the operations of, if this bill kind of goes to pass, we get the fund in place. I'm talking about the operation. So if we're talking about, the $100 and then the $5, who's, what are that there are commingling of funds there that I want us to be, cognizant about, because, to your point, you mentioned that this was at, can you hear? Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Marguerite. You mentioned that this was occurred at the state level and it only accrued $100,000. And so my question again, how did they, or how are we going to kind of address the commingling of funds issue with regards to what the city is paying and also what the contractor is paying as well?
I don't think there would be a legal commingling.
Okay.
Like, we have a lot of these, not a lot, probably a lot in finances eyes, but we have multiple, like, non-lapsing funds, and
Okay.
and it's okay to have in your fund, like, the $5 from the contractor
Yes.
and the $500 from United Way and the, like, $10 you put in for this budget. And again, these are fake numbers.
Yeah, totally understand.
Just as an example. But so there's no legal issue there, and then the fund is non-lapsing. So, like, if you don't spend it all in 1 year, it just keeps living
just
there.
keeps- okay, so that would-
And
okay.
it doesn't go through the normal budget process.
Okay.
So, it just lives there forever and can only be used for apprenticeships.
Okay.
But because it is a non-lapsing fund,
Mm-hmm.
under the charter mechanism, you've pulled it out from, like, regular budget land.
Yes.
So you're not going to have an, I don't think you're going to have a legal issue with the
Commingling
commingling.
of
Once
funds,
it's there,
okay.
it's there.
And then my second question is, and this is just for my knowledge, so I forgot to ask this during Baltimore City Public Schools portion of the hearing. What's the difference between this and Apprenticeship Maryland? Is there a substantive difference between those two programs?
I don't know, but I know that this bill is only just creating the fund.
Okay.
It doesn't, it restricts it to apprenticeships, so if the council feels like that needs to be further defined
Okay.
as to what the fund can be used for, fine, otherwise you keep it, larger, but I didn't see, and I could be wrong, but I didn't see something in there that said, like, only this type of apprenticeship, or we're gonna fund apprenticeships by paying other existing nonprofits versus we're gonna use the money in the fund to, like, advertise to youth that apprenticeships are a good
Okay.
thing to do. Like,
Yeah,
is
no,
that
I just want to make sure that it's not competition between the two, so we are working together to,
I don't think this fund addresses, like, the creation of
Okay.
this fund doesn't address, like, what will the money ultimately be used for and what apprenticeship-y things, I
Okay.
made that word up, what apprenticeship-y things you want to use the money to do. Like, so, valid concern, but I'm not sure this bill has it. If you want to restrict it in the charter further, like, that's something you could look at. But right now, I'm pretty sure it's just apprenticeship in, like, the,
in workforce development. I'm just looking at.
yeah, and we're, right. So,
So, I'm just going back to the actual languages, non-lapsing, Dante, Barksdale
Right.
Career Technology Educate to exclusively to supplement pre-apprenticeship programs and other workforce development programs. So that's the language that
right.
that's the language that I was referring to when I was talking about the competition of programs. I want to make sure that if we are, having workforce development and apprenticeship programs here in the city, we want to make sure that they're working collaboratively together and they're
Right.
not competing for the same dollars as well.
Yeah, and as, Aaron can correct me if I'm totally off base here, but I'm pretty sure the law is, like most charter amendments, that it gives the city the power to create the fund by ordinance. So, like, this just does the part of pulling it out of the budget. But, like, you would come back with another ordinance and say, okay, we now want to create the apprenticeship fund, but here's our problem. Like, we don't want, or we only like this, or this is the further restriction. And that's something you could put in an ordinance and then if it wasn't working or it didn't operate the way you wanted, you could you could edit your ordinance far easier than a charter change. So like, obviously after this charter, assuming this passes, you still have to wait for it to go on the ballot and be approved and blah, blah, blah. But once you create the fund by ordinance, that's something you can, as a legislative body, amend over time or put in whatever your,
Okay.
I mean, frankly, this isn't really, it is kind of legal advice, but not. This is your creation. So a court's going to look to your intention and what you want to do. And keeping very broad language in the charter gives you room and flexibility to narrow it in a council bill if that's what you choose to do.
Yep.
But if you go the other way, then you're going to have to go back through the charter process to make a change to the charter language, if that's making sense.
No, that makes
Okay.
a lot of sense, and I just wanted to kind of really understand the overall purpose and the intent down the line as well. So thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
No, thank you, Councilman Reporter. It was a great question, and I appreciate, the thoughtful answer, because it cleared up some things for me, too. Any additional questions or comments? Okay, I think we're good. And any other agencies that have any additional feedback for the committee? All right, so at this point, we would be looking for public testimony. It doesn't look like anyone is signed up to testify at this point. Want to give it a second or two? I don't see anybody else. I think we're in intimate company here. All right, so again, we don't have any public testimony. And at this point, as I mentioned, that we are going to take an additional look at this in a work session for not only the amendments that the law provided, but also the Council President's Office had some amendments. So we're going to recess at this moment, and then we'll come back for a work session to look at those amendments. So again, I thank everyone for their time and input this morning, and this meeting is adjourned.